What happened? I'll tell you what happened. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Of course, we typically come your way Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. However, there's something that's called madness. When I hear the term madness, I think of my buddy Marty McPadden back at ESPN. Madness. That was his nickname. March Madness this time. March Madness, of course. And Thursday night was opening night. We've got more games on Friday. I did look at the scores, and I actually saw the first basket go through a hoop that I have seen this entire basketball season, and probably for the last 3 or 4 years. Just one or two at the end of the Texas Tech against somebody game last night. So I did look at the scores. I can't remember many of them, except for there were a couple teams in the SEC that lost, and I know that the SEC is by far and away the best conference in college basketball, but Georgia lost, and I thought somebody else lost. Missouri? And I saw that Purdue won, saw some other scores. Appreciate you being here. Hope you had a good first day on your bracket. Hope the bracket has not been busted yet. I got to think that it's pretty well intact. Although Clemson was a 5 seed, they lost. I remember seeing that score as well. But welcome into the Voice of College Football again. We come your way Monday through Friday. This is our big banner show here, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And starting next week, some excellent guests will be on the way. So you just won't have to hear from me all the time. Excellent guests coming our way starting next week. We got Chris Phillips on hand from SEC Unfiltered. Will Gunter from the Early Game, Columbia, South Carolina radio, and others, I'm sure. In the chat, Mike G. Which team is the word potential used on the most, Ole Miss or Penn State? Well, I got to think that last season, the Penn State pretty much fulfilled its potential to a certain degree. They came within a missed kick or a made kick by Notre Dame of going to the national championship game. That was a excellent season by Penn State. When you're recruiting around 10th in the country most seasons, and you go to a college football semifinal game and you're a interception, field goal, however you want to phrase it, one play away from the national championship game, I don't know that there's too much more potential to be squeezed out of that program, at least for last season. I do get your point, though. They have not raised themselves all the way up to the mountaintop. I get it. But I would say that Clemson has been the only school to consistently play at an elite level for a period of time with not delivering top-end recruiting classes, elite recruiting classes. Clemson was able to do that for 6-7 years. Michigan was able to do that for basically one season in regards to success in the playoffs and win a national championship without stellar recruiting classes. And Penn State has not had stellar elite recruiting classes. They've had extremely good recruiting classes, not elite. Now we've got something called the transfer portal. And that was another reason why Michigan was able to elevate, and Florida State was able to elevate that same season, 13-0 or 13-0 before they lost the bowl game. Potential. Man, the school that wasted the most talent and potential from around 2010 up until 2 years ago was Texas. Not even close. I would say Miami is a better example of that statement. Ole Miss is 21-5 the last 2 years. They played in a New Year's Six game 2 years ago against Penn State. They won the game. They finished 11-2. They finished 10-3 last year. They came one play away from a playoff. So this has not been like lasting a long time for Ole Miss. It's not like they've failed to reach their potential for 5 or 6 straight years. So I would go Miami, Texas up until 2 years ago, then Miami. Happy Friday, Karen. Good to see you. Happy Friday. Dave's here. So Clemson was the 5. They lost. I don't know if any other 5 seeds lost to a 12 seed. That used to be a thing, that the 12s would beat the 5s. But if you look through the course of history, it's actually about where it should be. The 5s win like 75% of the time. But that used to definitely be a thing. Tukey G is here. Good morning to you. And of course, Tukey G is the selector of our first of the weekly late night call-in shows. That's coming up April 11th. Tell your family and friends, your neighbors, go out on the streets and just shout it. April 11th, 11 p.m. Eastern time, call-in show. Should be a good time. So that would make us about, 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away, 3 weeks away from that. So that's on a Friday night. There we go. 3 weeks from now, 11 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to select a different time each and every week for the big late night call-in show. So if you have your recommendation, your favorite time slot, save it, and then you can let me know. The Amazon link's in the description section of all the videos, including this one. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide, and you can contribute. That is the way that you can contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Use the Amazon link, please. We are combining, like we did yesterday with Ohio State, we are combining the college football show with our Ole Miss Rebels Live, which is typically on Wednesday over on the Ole Miss channel. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And here we are on a Friday with the Ole Miss show. So this is a combo, the college football show, combined with March Madness pregame, combined with the Ole Miss Rebels live show, when we have our two ladies, Leanne and Ruby, show up. Jackson, appreciate you being here. We expect to start the Ole Miss portion of this at roughly noon. Yes, shop on Amazon, and thank you so much for leaving the link there. All right, a few things come to mind today. Check out the video I just posted about an hour ago on the Georgia driving situation, the latest of the Georgia driving incidents, and my thoughts about what should be done. The main reason why that is empty. I'm just going to leave it like that as a reminder. Reminds me of the old Andy Griffith episode where Goober built a car in the courthouse. This just came to mind. Goober built a room in the courthouse. Built a car in the courthouse because he had to fix the car. Gilly needed him to fix his car, but he promised Andy he was going to stay in the courthouse and answer the phone. And so after all sorts of theatrics and drama and comedic flair, Goober built the car. He took the car from outside, dismantled it, and rebuilt it so he could work on it in the courthouse. And Andy blew a gasket, of course. He needed to. He should have. I would have as well. And then at the end of the episode, some of Andy's sheriff buddies from across the state were coming in or through town, and they stopped in and they said, hey, this is a great example. This is like a real life model for people to look at and touch. And, this is a great exhibition here for our driving safety program. So this is what I have left for our University of Georgia driving safety program. This is it right here. And had I thought of that Andy Griffith episode, I might have put that in the video. So this has become our University of Georgia driving safety program exhibit. That's what it is. So enjoy. We may just leave it there for a while. We could just leave it there for a while. People will start to ask, and we'll let them know this is our University of Georgia football driving safety program exhibit. That's it. All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here. Please like the video. Please subscribe. If you're watching us on Facebook, Twitter, we welcome you. We certainly are thankful to have you here. But if you would like to comment where I can see and respond to it, you've got to be here on YouTube. Also, this is a story that I just think keeps giving and giving and giving. Well, the Georgia driving incident, that keeps giving and giving and giving 25 times over the last 2 years. 25 driving incidents in 2 years. But the more football-related story that keeps giving and giving, I think, is this discussion concerning spring football. We had another one on the Ohio State show on Thursday, which is right here. And I think that there are some good points to be raised concerning spring football and what to do with spring football. And I find myself to be more and more on the side of Deion Sanders concerning all sorts of incidents and all sorts of topics that I wasn't necessarily didn't really enjoy his approach to the program early on. But we're working on season 3 here with Deion Sanders, and he talked about, of course, going to spring football scrimmages. I like the idea. Unfortunately, we've got no one to organize this. We have no one that is in charge to take hold of this, because as it stands right now, we're already in spring football. Nothing can be done about it this season. However, if we could get the right people in play, pull them together, they discuss everything involved. They go to their own little committees and they determine what are the pros and cons, what are the pluses and minuses, what needs to be organized, and what are the logistics involving spring football against real football teams. And I think he would stay regional. I remember, like I mentioned the other day, the Buffalo Bills playing the Cleveland Browns in scrimmages, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns, even though they played 2 games in the regular season, they scrimmaged. So you would keep it regional. You wouldn't tax the players by forcing them to travel. And the spring football game has become more of an opportunity for the fans to get close to the players. I think that should be capitalized on more than the actual watching of football. But this is a way to do both. This is a way to have somewhat real football, scrimmages played between these teams in private, 2 or 3 practices in private, and then they come out on Saturday and deliver a real scrimmage, not a real game, a real scrimmage. And Fran Brown of Syracuse apparently said that he's all for it. Let's get Syracuse and Colorado on the field. Let's do it. We've got about a month to do it. It can be done. Games were scheduled in 3 or 4 days during 2020, during the pandemic. We can schedule a scrimmage a month in advance. Let's do one. Let's see what it looks like. I'm sure it's going to be much more entertaining than watching Colorado compete against itself or bump into each other. Is what they do. They basically play like pinball as football players during these spring games. It could be so much better. Again, check out the video on the Georgia football situation. I am certainly here to comment on it if you would like, and I have failed to leave the call-in line, which I will do right now. Did you read through this Matt Weiss situation, the former Baltimore Ravens, Michigan Wolverines assistant coach, and what he was up to for 8 years from 2015 to 2023? What he was up to? Not just football shenanigans at the University of Michigan, but man, I will possibly address this in a video as well. No glasses. Where are my glasses? I don't have my contacts in. Okay. Former NFL, University of Michigan assistant football coach allegedly hacked into the computer accounts of thousands of college athletes seeking intimate photos and videos. How pathetic. This makes football cheating look innocent, look harmless. Matt Weiss worked for the Ravens, then the University of Michigan in 2021, charged with 14 counts of unauthorized computer access, 10 counts of identity theft. Fired in 2023 as Michigan's co-offensive coordinator after failing to cooperate with the school's investigation of his access to computers. Wonder why? Phone and email messages seeking comment from his attorney have not been returned. From 2015 to 23, Weiss gained access to the databases of more than 100 colleges and universities that were maintained by a third-party vendor. Downloaded personal information and medical data of more than 150,000 athletes. The 14-page document portrays him as a computer whiz, saying Weiss, quote, cracked the encryption, protecting the passwords assisted by research that he did on the internet. Got access to social media, email, cloud storage accounts of more than 2,000 athletes, as well as more than 1,300 students or alumni from schools across the country, primarily targeted female college athletes. He researched and targeted it. It gets creepier as we go. Researched and targeted these women based on their school affiliation, athletic history, and physical characteristics. I would probably underline the latter of the three. His goal was to obtain private photographs, videos never intended to be shared beyond intimate partners. He kept notes on photos and videos that he downloaded. I didn't get this far, I don't believe. Kept notes on photos and videos that he downloaded, commenting on the bodies and sexual preferences. Oh, I did not. And sometimes returning years later to look for new images. Quote, our office will move aggressively to prosecute computer hacking to protect the private accounts of our citizens. After more than a decade as an assistant coach with the Ravens under coach John Harbaugh, Weiss moved to Michigan to work for Jim Harbaugh. Weiss's home in Ann Arbor was searched by police in January of 2023, shortly before he was fired. He said at the time that he was cooperating and was looking, quote, forward to the matter being resolved. I'm sure he was. So at the time that this came out, again, this was 2 years ago, plus we obviously related this to football. I know I did. I didn't know that anything else was involved in this. I just figured, well, with all the other crap going on at the University of Michigan's football program concerning cheating, and that he was fired supposedly for suggesting and recommending to football players not to cooperate with the NCAA. That's, of course, what we thought it was all about. But lo and behold, Matt Weiss has some serious issues. Dave's here routinely posts some gems, and there is another one. My recommendations for Matt Weiss look like this, as posted earlier on X. I went this route, and I'm being completely sincere, totally sincere on this. This is not a joke. This is not in any way making light of the situation. So I had just read what I needed to read concerning this situation. And, he needs to repent of his behavior, true repentance. And that would involve going to counseling. He needs lots of counseling, deep counseling. Then hopefully there are potential mentors out there that could teach him and model before him how to be a man. Then maybe down the line, he can step up his game and actually get a quality female. Hopefully that's in his future. But first things first, repentance and counseling for one Matt Weiss. All right. And of course, discipline. He's got to be held accountable for this. That's first and foremost. He has to be held accountable. And hopefully the proper measures are taken to ensure that. I don't know that we as a society will ever agree on, in these type of situations, what the punishment should be. And I won't delve into that because that has to be thought through. So those are our football items at the time. Deion Sanders, Colorado, and their spring games on ESPN2, but also looking for possibly putting something together where we have scrimmages. I like the idea. Think about your favorite team. Think about everybody in the chat. Your favorite team, first of all, do you like the idea of practicing against another team and then holding a spring/game, meaning really a scrimmage? And then who would your opponent of choice be? Make it reasonable. I'm thinking if you're the University of Michigan, you play Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, Central Michigan. Those are your three best options. Toledo, everybody close. Ohio State, any of the Ohio schools in the MAC, and so forth. Maybe Cincinnati, Ohio State, Cincinnati. That would be an attractive spring scrimmage. What do you say? I like it. And make it free. Free for the public. This gives me another idea. Free spring football games. There's no reason that should not happen, except for greedy people. Greedy people are the only ones who would be in the way of free spring football games. Don't charge them $5. Don't charge them $10. Don't charge them for parking. Nothing. Zero. Even if those people don't buy any gear, merchandise, go to any other games, they watch the games, they sit on their couch. Just for sitting on their couch, and watching 12 or 13 games a year, they still put money in those athletes' pockets and those coaches' pockets and those administrators' pockets by driving up TV ratings that then turn into the most cash, most revenue for the sport. Spring games should be free. I can't emphasize that enough. Maybe that's going to take the place of the helmets. We're going to put up a banner. Spring games are free. Spring games are free. Do I got a marker here? I think I got one over there. Do I got some tape? No tape. Maybe over there. We are redesigning the set today thanks to the Georgia football team. This may not be good enough. This is probably old. Let's see. Here we free. Yeah. Free. Yeah, let's do it like this. Free. This is riveting, I know. Free. I was just railing on the Department of Education a few minutes ago. Let's see if I can spell these one syllable words here. Free. Spring. My spacing may not be the best. We'll see. If I have time to become college football commissioner, I'd have to look at my schedule, figure that out. This would be just one of the many benefits. Just one. We're picking up that marker scent at this point. I've had this thing out for so long. There we go. Okay. I'll be back in just a second. Hang right there. Bring about 50 people with you. There's got to be tape in this place. No tape. Found about 14 tape measures. These spring games. 3 spring games. That hurts me. That hurts me. We're going to go on a campaign here at the Voice of College Football for free spring games. But we do appreciate you being here. We left the call-in line there in the chat if you'd like to talk to me. Talk some Colorado football about this Dion idea about the spring football games. And, of course, Matt Weiss. Yeah. Shared my thoughts about that. So if you're just joining us and you want the commentary on Matt Weiss or the Georgia football team, check out that video. We just posted it. And Jackson put that in the chat. My thoughts about the Georgia football team. And not necessarily holding the players accountable. No, holding Kirby Smart accountable. At this point, yeah. All coaches have players that do stupid things. You hold the player accountable. But at a certain point, you hold the man in charge accountable. Kirby Smart is a football coach. He's paid to know football. So he's held accountable for the football results on the field. And where he does not have expertise on the football field, what happens? He brings in assistant coaches that have expertise in certain nuances of the game, right? Well, he's a leader of young men. He's a leader of leaders. His coaches are leaders. He should be coaching them or trying to help them or give them resources because they have closer relationships with the players mostly than he does. And then he's a CEO. The guy makes $13 million a year. He's a CEO. So good CEOs, when they don't understand something, when they don't know how to deal with something, because you cannot be an expert at everything. Actually, you can only be an expert at 1 or 2 things. Maybe. Very few of us in life ever attain expertise in anything. But let's say Kirby Smart's an expert in running a football team. He's obviously shown not to be an expert at running a football program. Running a football team, he's an expert. Running a football program, he's got one big issue, at least one big issue that's obvious to all of us. And he should be reaching out for help. I would like to know the help that he has sought, the resources, the expertise that he has sought. I don't know. I've not seen any evidence of that, and I have not, as I continue to look for tape, not seen any evidence of that. Gregory says under construction. Gregory probably unaware. Check out the Georgia video. That's all I will say, Gregory. That explains everything. This is due to the Georgia football team. They are responsible. Georgia football team is responsible for this. Absolutely, they are. We're going to talk Ole Miss football a little bit later. We're going to do our complete Ole Miss football show right here with Leanne Herring and Ruby Dreher. So we're looking forward to that you should be watching every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, hey, I got a guest. Look at this.
Morning, jumping on a little early. I know that we are off our regular broadcast time for Ole Miss Live, but definitely a lot going on. I know spring is in the air. March Madness is here. A lot going on, Ole Miss football, but there's a lot going on in Ole Miss hoops. Of course, we know, Mark, our men's, women's team making the dance. So where to start? Let's get to it.
Okay. This is where we're going to start as I look for your banner, because everyone should know who Leanne is and where to find her. You can find her on Twitter. Right there. Leanne Herring, RW. It's right there. Go to Twitter, find her right there. And actually, Lee Ann, I just found out this week. Just I confirmed it this week. It's Lee Ann. There's a space in between.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I
It's okay.
have incorrectly, and it's probably still wrong there. I got to correct it. I'll correct it in just a second.
No. It's correct how that looks on Twitter. They don't let me do spaces, so believe
Yeah, the
me.
Twitter,
Yeah.
but I do
So
have your
or
name there, and
X.
I need to
So
spell it
yeah,
correctly. You should have been after me on that a long time ago. Do you want to see my sign? Do you notice
yes.
something different with my set
It's
here?
empty. It's empty, and I was gonna say, are we getting a set rebuild? Did I miss the memo on that one? Yeah, I noticed that it was empty this morning. So what's going on?
So even if you don't want to take 8 or 9 minutes to watch my Georgia video that I just posted, just watch the first 10 seconds. It will be complete.
Okay.
This is the fault of the Georgia football team. They did this. They did this.
Oh goodness. Oh
Yeah,
goodness.
they tore this up. So I was going on a rant about spring football, and I would love to get your thoughts as well. And I actually was running around the house looking for tape. I found about 14 tape measures. Couldn't find any tape. Found a marker because I want to put this sign up. You tell me, what do you think? Do you like my sign? Can you read
I
it?
do. Free spring games. Yeah. I mean, talk about um having to keep up with all the changes with spring ball. And we've talked a lot about it a little bit on the recruiting show as far as, it's just a new era of college football. We've been, hearing the ins and outs, the rumblings, of course, where programs are having to readjust. The biggest thing obviously is the number one thing, trying to avoid injury, but a lot of it has to do with the whole rumblings of tampering, and of course, running the programs like an NFL. Lane Kiffin kind of talked a little bit about his presser this week, wrapping up spring football, how you hate to say it, but the way things are going, the way college football is going, we're going to run programs like NFL franchises where we treat spring practice like OTAs. And I mean, we talked about it on the recruiting show, now how become now in college programs, the idea of a front office, a general manager, a strong player personnel is going to go a long way. We've seen, at USC, the hires down there, how quickly that front office change has made a strong shift in recruiting that Lincoln Riley has been thirsting for. So, it's a make or break, but I mean, this is the time that we're in. We talked about how, with some of the sources and different conferences that I've been talking to across the board, the biggest thing they're seeing is, agents shopping around for kids that may not even be interested in other schools, presenting rosters. So again, it's a whole new era. It has been for a long time, but I think now it's just more out in the open. I always say, Mark, how people get so surprised when they hear of all these things that are going on. I said it's really always been there. It's just never been up front, and it's really just never been legal. The idea of paying players and the bag, and all of a sudden this kid's on campus and he's got a new house and a new car. I always tell people, for those of you who don't know, I started out as far as covering college sports out in Kentucky, and I really learned the art of recruiting when it came to college sports with when Kentucky basketball. I always tell coaches, you think that football NIL is crazy, man, go talk to a couple of high school, college hoops coaches in some big programs out of the Midwest, out in Kentucky. I mean, some of these things have been going on for years, but again, it's just now out in the open. It's legal, so it's just interesting to see the evolution. But more and more, college programs, even high school programs, are going to be, triple A clubs, minor league, farm clubs for the big show.
And so, Leanne, I just always thought that there was just a high correlation, a ridiculously high correlation between these players signing a scholarship and winning the lottery at the same time. I just thought that maybe that's what happened. No.
You know,
So,
you, well, it is like winning the lottery. It's just you buy a different ticket to the show. And again, like we talk about it all the time, it's just now programs are having to constantly stay up with the Joneses because, these kids, like I say, especially at the high school level, they travel in packs. They play off these 7-on-7 teams and these, and these big tournaments. And, and now we find that they're comparing offers. Their best friend goes for a visit to Georgia. this offer's on the table. And now, you can't expect a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid these days to keep quiet on what George is bringing to the table. So again, it becomes a whole new art of negotiation. We see that even at the high school level, a lot of the prominent players are finding themselves having to become represented by some form of agent, whether it's an extended family a member, a coach, somebody that are close to them, that they trust in this process, because now they're even having to navigate it early on in an earlier level. So definitely a change of game. It's hard to keep up, but again, programs are going to have to move with the times and just kind of roll with the punches. And because I just don't see it getting regulated anytime soon, as far as NIL and all that, trying to keep up with it.
Folks, one of your best sources for recruiting news, in addition to Leanne, but in terms of a show, is obviously our recruiting show, On the Move. And the transfer portal is going to open up, I think, sometime in April. Do you know what the dates are?
Yeah, I think it's like mid-April. I don't know why April, like 12th, 13th comes to mind. It might be a little bit sooner, of course, we know. And we'll hit a little bit on the Ole Miss show, or I know it's early for Ruby, so whenever she jumps on. But, grad transfers are the exception. They can come in anytime. A popular grad transfer that we had on the recruiting show this week is definitely on the move. Ashad Williams, taking in Purdue. Michigan State was at Arkansas, will be at Ole Miss this weekend. So again, the grad transfers are a little bit exception to the rule. They can go in and out of the portal anytime, so they have a little bit of leeway. But yes, we're just a couple of weeks away. And again, that goes back to what a lot of coaches have been kind of talking about. We can only take so much away from spring practice, with these teams, especially now they become more secretive. They become a little bit less available. I know we've seen a lot of programs make a shift more to like a game day experience versus actually getting to see reps and downs, and kind of see who's getting in and who's getting out. But a lot of the coaches are saying this is an evaluation period, because now, a lot of the roster rebuilding, a lot of guys are in or out. So at the same time, spring practice, especially, we know at Ole Miss, is really being used as an evaluation period to see what are still our areas of need. Are we going to go to the high school recruiting? Are we going to jump on the class, this 2026 coming in class? Are we going to have to fill the void in the portal? So again, while spring may be looking a little different as far as how practice and reps are getting done, it still remains an essential part of the program to be able to evaluate the direction that they're going and kind of see where guys are lining up and where they need to fill some voids in such a short amount of time, because summer ball will be here before you know it, and fall camp will be here before we know it. I mean, I can't believe we're halfway almost through March, almost at the end of March, and April will be here. And so again, the spring evaluation, the spring ball still is really an essential part to the program, especially with how summer will look as far as recruiting and limitations and all that kind of stuff ahead.
Well, Leanne, I know that you have so many notes, so many news items that you want to get to, and we will. And of course, when we transition into the Ole Miss show and have Ruby here, we've got so many things to get to, some really good things. We want to remind everyone that we've got an Ole Miss channel. If you're watching either here on the main channel, you might be on Facebook, you might be on Twitter. We've got an Ole Miss channel, and we have just dropped the link in the chat. So please join us there. We'll also get you the link to the recruiting channel. And Leanne, if you could run down some of the recent guests that we've had on both the recruiting channel in our On the Move show and on Ole Miss Live, because it's been amazing the number of guests that you've been able to bring on. And the list continues, and we know that it's going to grow in the next few weeks. But we've had some great interviews, and we would just encourage everyone again to check out the Ole Miss channel, and then also the recruiting channel, because it's just going to continue to get better and better.
Well, again, we really appreciate, as much as we love to bring the show to you, we can't get it done as far as recruits, coaches, and everything who have given us access to the families and whatnot. But, for those Ole Miss fans, having Shakai Mills-Knight, he is not an early enrollee, but we know he's going to probably be one of the most coveted commits that we have as far as that running back room. Definitely shape. He's set to be on campus, spinning out his tenure at the Baylor school. Have really watched his career. Again, I think he's going to be an asset when he hits foot on campus this summer. It's a kid that I've had the pleasure of watching that I think is going to do a lot for this running back room. We've had him on the show. Of course, we know Ashad Williams, joining the show, the number one cornerback. It looks, while he's got, I mean, the moment he went in the portal, we knew that a lot of people would be answering, but what we're hearing from the rumblings, it just seems like Ole Miss is a good fit for him. He will be here this weekend. Of course, North Alabama transfer, looking at Michigan State, Purdue made a visit to Arkansas. So there's a lot of teams that have really been a segue. He's joined us on the show. And again, you can see up here, if you use our recruiting channel, we talk national recruiting, and there's just a lot of guys we've been able to have. We had rising up and comer on the recruiting show, Derek Baker, formerly of St. Thomas Aquinas, who's transferred down to Milton, really made a splash. Is making a splash in his movement. Will do a lot. Of course, we know that he's following Luke Nichols' role, who's off at Miami, being the understudy down there to Carson Beck. But again, big shoes to fill, but doing a nice job settling into that Ben Reeves offense. So we had him on the show. Again, we've had some up and comers. Again, that's the one thing I love about what Mark and I are doing as far as the recruiting show. We're bringing on the big names that you hear a lot about across the board, getting to talk one-on-one with them, but also we're doing a great job at trying to bring you new, fresh talent that we get to scout at some of these OT7, some of these 7-on-7 tournaments, these Under Armour camps that we'll be going to. So really a lot still to come this off season. We are off this week as far as traveling. My boys have lacrosse and I have cheerleading to coach this weekend, but nonetheless, next weekend we'll be back in Dallas, OT7. A lot of these kids have been gracious enough, because we do stream during school time. They can't, sometimes they're not able to sneak away from class and all that kind of stuff, but we have a really nice guest lined up for the Ole Miss show. He won't be joining us. He's actually on a flight to Dallas to compete with his team at OT7, but he's just fresh off an Ole Miss visit. Gave me tons of good content as far as, talking about what he really loved about Oxford. So we're going to share that here on the show. But a lot of good stuff coming up with Mark and I, and then of course Mark, Ruby, and I. A lot of big plans for this upcoming football season with Ole Miss Live. So like I said, like, subscribe, share. And as always, if you're like me in the car, you can't catch us on the move, or you can't catch us live, or any of our Voice of College Football shows live, you can always tune in on your favorite audio platform, Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff. If you know me, and when I'm driving, I'm either hearing music or sports. So again, can't find us. If you can't join us on the move because you're on the move, like I said, always can tune in or catch us on the replay on all your favorite audio live streams.
You saw the background change. You saw the color changes. That means Ruby's ready. Here she is. She's
Hi, guys.
Ruby.
Hey guys, Bryson. I know it's early. Bryson, shy for everybody, man.
Yeah, I couldn't sleep. I'm so excited for March Madness Friday. I feel like this is the best day of the year.
Yeah, I mean, and when you have not one but both your men's and your women's programs, we don't have to worry about one playing in the big show and one playing in the NIT. So it's nice to have them all together in one sitting. Yeah, no doubt.
No, it's like a euphoric experience. I have a friend who she's quite a bit younger than me, but she's from Vegas as well, and ended up going to Vegas. I'm not to Vegas, to Ole Miss. And I was talking to her the other day. And I'm like, I don't think that you understand just how lucky you really are as an Ole Miss student. Like, I have never seen Ole Miss go to March Madness, as a student or a fan. And that you have the football program, the baseball program's great, and the basketball teams, both men and women's. It's a good time to be an Ole Miss student.
Oh, it is. I know.
So it reminds me of a comment that has stuck with me for this many years. So sorry, Ole Miss fans, I'm going to bring up a bad memory from March Madness, but it's a famous one because it's going to be shown like it is every year all over the place. But I only bring it up because I was sitting right behind the bench. I was on media row, and full court pass, Bryce Drew, buzzer beater, and Ole Miss loses, gets knocked out as a 4 seed in the first round. And I go in the locker room. Obviously, that is not a great place to be after a loss and your hopes and dreams dashed. They were a 4 seed. They'd won 22 games. They won like their last 7 games in the SEC. They were on a roll. And I still remember Josan Darby. I had to look up his name today because I was like, what is his? And looked up the roster for that year. Josan Darby. Yes, really cool guy. But he said, it's March Madness and I'm mad. That was his line after the game. Yeah. So I did get to see the Rebels go to a few NCAA tournaments. So that was fun during my time covering Ole Miss athletics. And again, if you are joining us on the main channel, here's the deal. We get together with these two every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time over on the Ole Miss channel. So if you're joining us on the main channel, Twitter, Facebook, these two ladies are kind enough to allow me to jump on their show every week. And but you're on my turf, you two, this week. You're on my turf this week. So we're doing our Ole Miss show a little bit different this week, and looking forward to, let's talk a little bit more March Madness, because the two teams both play today, correct? The men and the women. And a nice little historical matchup for the men taking on North Carolina, who had to play in the first four to get into the field of 64, and they just kind of obliterated San Diego State. So, Ruby, what do you think about the men's chances first and foremost?
Well, this is one of those situations where I would have liked to be playing anybody else but a blue blood program. It's kind of bizarre to me that this is, the situation that we're in, but it also doesn't surprise me as an Ole Miss fan. I also have been really enjoying everyone kind of doubting Ole Miss and kind of picking UNC over us. I think that that's exactly where, as an Ole Miss fan, you kind of want to be, is anytime that everyone's going like, oh, Ole Miss is going to wipe the floor with UNC, or they're a higher seed, so they're definitely going to handle business. It's like, all right, we've all seen this play out before. So I'm feeling good about it, but I also think like UNC came out and absolutely destroyed, SDSU. So I think that they have a little bit of momentum, and they've already had a game under their belts in the tournament. Whether that's going to be good or bad for them, I think we'll end up seeing, but I'm definitely excited for this game.
Yeah, it's like Ruby said, she said it in football season too. I feel like Ole Miss plays better when we have the cards stacked against us, when we're the underdog. Chris Beard talked in his presser about, the quotes that are coming out about, Ole Miss not deserving to be here, and yada, 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 and it being a young team. And, he kind of nipped that in the bud, saying, this team is more experienced. We have a more experienced team. I could understand if this was the team coming in, last season, but this team, is a lot more seasoned than they were this time last year, and Chris Beard, as far as a coach, when we brought him in, we knew he was going to bring a ton to the table. And Ole Miss, like any program, has had its ups and downs. But I mean, going 24-22 this season, having a 30th best offense in the country matched by a 25th defense, where Ole Miss has been in the past, definitely a step up. But I like what Beard brings to the table and how he coaches in these type of situations. I mean, is this his fourth team that he's going to be able to lead to an NCAA tournament? So, if anybody who can understand the pressures of what it takes to navigate through in a tournament in the madness that is March, it's Chris Beard. And I think him and his staff are putting together, a nice run. Again, like Ruby said, I wish we weren't facing a blue blood like UNC, and they weren't coming off a pounding. But again, that could be in our benefit, them having, played an extra game. We might get them a little bit, off their guard. So it'll be interesting to see how things tip off in Milwaukee. But again, exciting time for the Rebels. And like Ruby said, when all the programs are doing good, it's good from a recruiting standpoint, because it's exciting, because, when you got football just being, the thing, it's great, but nowadays it takes a lot more across the board, I think, to attract recruits. And I think, like Ruby said, it's a great time to be an Ole Miss student when so many programs are doing so well, especially the hoops program. It really helps, other programs as far as recruiting. We have a lot of visits coming up in the next couple weeks, and if the men's and women's can make a run, man, it's an exciting time for the Rebels, no doubt.
And one really interesting thing that you kind of mentioned about Chris Beard too is, he's taken plenty of teams to this tournament, but he has never lost in the first round, which I think is, a big testament to him and his ability to get the team out of the first round. It's when you watch March Madness, it almost seems like some of the best teams, the bigger problem is just kind of finding their footing. It's oftentimes for a lot of these teams, it's been a lull in between their last game, and for them to just be able to jump in and just continue to win. I mean, I don't want to jinx. I've been thinking about it all week of I don't want to jinx Chris Beard and this is the one that he ends up losing in the first round. But I do think, like you said, his ability to coach in these big games and having been in these big games before is going to be really big for him.
Sorry, I muted myself there.
I was gonna say, I was like, I hear you.
I was shouting, Ruby, respond. Huh? You got nothing for me? Man, no, I said, Ruby Dreher, you are a superstitious type.
Yeah, you know that about me. And, after we talked about this last week too, of, which teams we hate and all of the things, I kind of got it worse because, I had talked all that crap about Arkansas, about how I hate them and blah, blah, blah. And then Ole Miss baseball ends up losing. We won game 1, lost game 2. And then in game 3, we're winning the whole time heading into the 9th. We just needed, just those 3 outs at the end, and they come back and hit 5 runs to win the game and lose the series. And it was just a whole thing that my initial thought was I got to talk to Mark about this because my superstitious mouth has just been, getting me into trouble.
Well, we're going to break that. We're going to have to do something radical. The next time Ole Miss loses a game, you're going to wear the same outfit the next game because you're going to just defy.
Just break it?
Okay. Yes. You're going to defy the jinx. You're just going to stare it down. That's what you're going to do.
I love that. I hopefully it works because everything.
And then if it doesn't work, you're going to have it out for me. You will never want to talk to me for the rest of your life.
For sure.
All right. What about the women? I see Leanne posting a few times about taking over Waco.
It's just exciting to see what Coach Yo has done in her time here. What is this, her 7th season? I mean, she came in here hungry and thirsty and trying to rebuild. And I know a lot of times, I especially learned that when I was covering Kentucky hoops, it was all about the men's basketball showcase. But I mean, there's so many women's programs here in the SEC that have just been in the rise. And Coach Yo's just been one of those programs that being able to take what she has and go make 4 consecutive trips back to back to the NCAA tournament with this team and just rebuilding with the recruiting. I mean, she's just really put this team on the map. And I think, her energy and what she brings to the table and, just across the board, she's a players coach. I mean, I don't think there's not any time that I've heard any of her current or former players that she's had, just not say how much that she pushes them, but how much they play for her because they just love her energy and what she does. And, I mean, we went 20-10 this season going up against Ball State, 27-7 showdown in Waco at Baylor, taking over the turf. I mean, Ball State has got in there, and I mean, they're just a defensive force, but like everyone's been saying, so is Ole Miss. So I really think that this women's hoops matchup is going to be a showdown of 2 defenses, and which of these defenses can make their offenses thrive, kind of thing. Because I mean, you're looking at 2 women's basketball teams that bring in really top strong defenses within their conference. Just like I said, in Ball State, I mean, they tore it up with their defense, really in their MAC run, and number 17 in the conference, but again, one of the best defenses in the country as far as Ball State and women's hoops. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of energy and matchup that Coach Yo and the defense, like she says, there wasn't an excitement about getting seated that way and going to play in Waco, but of course, I love it about our women's team, Ruby and Mark, that they're just well, our defense travels, and it really does. I mean, Ole Miss women's hoops, when it comes to defense on the road, I mean, they just get it on lockdown, and they're just one of few SEC teams that have been able to make, a back-to-back run beyond the first round in the tourney, aside from LSU and I think South Carolina. So again, I mean, got to be excited for the women's hoops heading up to Waco today.
I did
Absolutely.
All State breakdown. That was impressive.
I love that you mentioned kind of, the way that they felt about the seeding, because everyone watched that video. of Coach Joe and the rest of her team. And a lot of people were excited. And then a lot of people kind of criticized her for not looking more excited. And, you know, once they found out that they wouldn't be hosting in Oxford, she kind of looked like, all right, I like this, you know, and as a fan, I like that she looks at it and isn't just excited for an opportunity to go to the tournament, but she's excited for an opportunity to compete and kind of feels disrespected. And like I've said, you know, 100 times before, the theme of the Ole Miss is, you know, disrespect them so that they have a chance to prove something to you. And I think that we'll see that against Ball State.
Yeah.
Our buddy
and
Jackson.
I think Coach Yo. Oh.
Go to it.
No, you're good. But you talked a lot about it. I mean, we don't talk a lot about women's hoops and the success, but you know, Coach Yo, you got to give it to her because, like you said, Ruby, it seems like in every situation, no matter how far the women's team gets, she faces a lot of criticism, how her approach to the game is and stuff. But again, you got to give her credit because I mean, it's hard to take a women's program the way she inherited, you know, 7 seasons ago and turn it into to what it is, you know, considering that women's sports and a lot of the SECs and powerhouses, even no matter how well they're doing, don't get looked at the same as, you know, a men's hoop sports. Like I said, when I was in Kentucky, it was all about basketball, men's basketball, but the women's program at the time was doing just as well. So it's really interesting to take. But again, I mean, I think we all would have loved to see a regional host in Oxford. But again, it's like you said, I feel like if we would have had all those cards, would we have played the same? You know, I'm not saying we would have come with the same energy, but I feel like when it comes to the Ole Miss program, men's and women's programs, like when we play on the road, we play with the chip because usually everyone has us that we're undeserving to be there. So I think Coach Yo really feeds off of that, and I really like the energy that's going into this game in Waco today.
Absolutely. And she knows how to handle this too, because, you know, during the regular season or during the national games that are being televised, you know, she's too animated on the sideline with her team and again talking to the refs. And then during the show of when they find out that they didn't get the seed that they probably deserved, she's not animated enough. So I think that this will translate well for Ole Miss. And I just feel so lucky to be able to sit on my couch and watch, you know, back-to-back Ole Miss games today. And I think it's, you know, going to be really special, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, you 71 people watching, and I'm sure hundreds and hundreds of thousands to follow. We're usually not here if you're watching on the main channel or on Twitter or on Facebook. Well, we might be there. The Ole Miss channel is the place to be. That's where we want you to check out our Ole Miss content, and especially this show, Wednesdays, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we have dropped that link in the chat a number of times. It's the Ole Miss channel with these two, and I get to tag along. And we got Jackson. He says, this is going to be our segue, I guess, to spring football practice. This spring break, while you're looking for your lost shaker of salt. That's my best Jimmy Buffett. That's best I can do, friends. There we go. And Jackson's got a thing for Publix too. So if you're going through Publix, I didn't even know what Publix was until about a year ago when I moved. But anyway, so Publix, I get it now, Jackson. Tell the cashier at Publix, be kind and let them know that we've got an Ole Miss show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. All right. Well, we got to see Austin Simmons under fire against Georgia. It comes into a game against a team that never loses at that point, down 7-0, and he had to have instant chemistry, at least to a certain extent, to go bing, 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 75 yards down the field. That was pretty impressive to get them back. And then before Jackson Dart could recover and get back in the ball game, and of course, the rest is history. They took out Georgia on that night. Leanne, you've got a setup for a discussion on Austin Simmons and the chemistry he's going to have to build with what is somewhat of a new wide receiver core.
Yeah, you know, just kind of looking at the reps and stuff we were talking about earlier before you jumped on, you know, just the way spring practice looks these days. You can only take so much from spring ball in general. It doesn't mean it's less than important, not really. You know, Lane kind of talked about it, which I'm sure you guys both were jumped on, you know, about it's really like an evaluation period. And you mentioned it last week, how now we're shifting gears towards programs. And, you know, Lane talked about it and kind of hit on it, how, you know, as much as he doesn't want to say it's going to evolve to that, but you treat you treat spring practice like OTAs. You call that, Ruby. You said it right there. And then Lane this week, talking about it at his pressers. That's the shift that we're going to. There's so much you got to take into. Mark and I hit on about the idea of the evolution now. It's front offices in college football are now the thing we see. You not only got to hire a good coaching staff, of recruiting staff, but now you got to hire a strong personnel director. You got to definitely hire a football operations guy, a GM. Like it's like running an NFL program. But heading into spring ball, I couldn't think of a better coach as far as one who has experience in Lane Kiffin. If anybody knows, especially at a young age, how to go from college football to the NFL, it's Lane Kiffin. So again, I think much like Chris Beard, in a different sense, Lane brings a lot to the table on how you operate. But yeah, just watching a couple of clips and kind of seeing, of course, it's always great to see, the transfers coming out. I think, it's been a light practice. Kind of what we're hearing from Austin Simmons is he's just kind of that in that transition. He's a little bit less more vocal as far as a play caller than maybe Jackson Dart was. So I think it's just kind of seeing him watch and settling into his own and trying to find that chemistry, seeing him rep with some of the, new transfer wide receivers, a lot of the young guys stepping out. We know that this wide receiver room is almost completely new. Except with the return, obviously, of Caden Lee, who became a young force on that Rebel offense last year. I mean, we're basically starting from scratch. But again, even with this new look to this wide receiver room, with I think those transfers that we bring in, like Stribling, like Odom, coming out of high school, coming out, in college, didn't find their fit, but definitely you got a lot of talent, looks to be unleashed here. But again, I think it's going to be, an interesting year with Austin Simmons. But I think this spring is really just about him finding his voice and his chemistry and kind of settling into his own. I know that they kind of mentioned it in the pressers and stuff this week, Jackson Dart, we know, is going to be a hard act to follow, but I liked how Lane set it up. Austin Simmons is not going to be Jackson Dart. We have to remember that he's going to be Austin Simmons. And I think that that's such an important thing to address, because every quarterback, every position, every guy, they bring something new to the table. And, as much as we love having Jackson Dart, visiting back in town, all this kind of, that era is over at Ole Miss. And I think that, Simmons, it's gonna, the spring is really about him finding his voice. So it's going to be interesting to see, the kind of chemistry and where he starts.
Yeah, and something else that I want to mention about that too is, when Jackson Dart came in following Matt Corral, everybody said then, oh, well, Jackson Dart isn't going to be Matt Corral. And we need to remember that, Jackson Dart is going to be Jackson Dart. And now for it to be, kind of a role reversal, if we're staring down 3 elite quarterbacks at Ole Miss for the first time in a really long time. I'm excited to see what Austin Simmons does. And I'm also really glad that, Kiffin is kind of giving us a little bit more of an insight into those spring practices and letting the media team maybe post a few more clips than normally. It feels like I might have jinxed us with my comments last week of, that he doesn't let the media do anything or, watch anything other than a couple jumping jack warmups. So it's been fun to see these clips come out from Austin Simmons.
We'll keep talking that opposite direction, that reverse psychology. But like you said, you called it last week about the evolution of how spring practice is becoming like OTAs, and it's very much like an NFL franchise. And, you're just going to have to move with the times. And, I see the good and not so good. But like I was talking with Mark, I mean, you can only take away so much from spring. Doesn't make it less important, I feel like. And Kiffin kind of talked a little bit about it. It's important because we're having to rebuild. Like 75% of our rosters change. So, now the spring for them becomes an evaluation period, kind of seeing what direction do we go? What do we still need to get from the transfer portal? What positions are we going to hit hard in this 2026 class? So, I mean, spring, as much as it's not the typical spring that we've been used to seeing as far as how spring ball is supposed to look, it's still an important asset for the team, considering that there's not a lot of new looks to some key lines, like, wide receiver room, definitely the defensive line, offensive lines, a lot of young guys stepping up, which is really exciting too.
Yeah, and I think the evolution of the way that the conferences has, shifted when you think about the SEC schedule and the potential of adding another SEC game for some of these teams. And it's kind of important to protect your bodies in football. And with the way that spring practice has changed, I think that, a lot of that mindset and kind of, staring down the rest of the season, that's going to be big for a lot of teams, because it's not like the NFL. Obviously there's the next man up mentality, but your best players want to play the whole time, and there's not always a rotation at every single position. So it'll be good for a lot of these teams to kind of figure out and be the guinea pigs for this year, and we'll see how it goes. It might be horrible.
Ruby, I'm just starting to realize how much you're using your power. You need to be speaking things into existence that are good. You need to be using that superpower for good.
Yeah, I'm going to start saying, Ole Miss is going to win the national championship every single year, and maybe one of these years it'll work.
But if it doesn't, then you'll think it's a jinx.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. We got guys like Caden Prieskorn, and we've got Watkins, Harris, Trey Harris. Those guys move on, obviously. And then Caden Lee's a guy that obviously stepped up in a number of situations last year, especially the second half of the year. And Daquan Wright had 27 catches last year. And then you got a host of guys coming in, Trey Wallace from Penn State and others. So, Leanne, I know you also wanted to touch upon just not only Austin Simmons' development, but obviously that chemistry with the wide receivers and how he's going to need to develop that rapport.
Well, like Ruby said, it's an exciting time, for the Rebels to kind of see where things go. But even in this big change of having to really rework your roster, really kind of seeing, and much like Ruby said, this is not like the NFL where there's not always a chance for these guys. And what I really love about the way our spring practice is setting up is there's a lot of young guys who are stepping up to the plate and really get an opportunity, that have kind of waited their turn. And a kid that we talked a lot about that I had the opportunity to see before he was an enrollee in and it's just really exciting to hear, much like Suntarian Perkins, who we know has been kind of sitting out this off season. But, it's always great to hear about the young guys who are having the opportunity to, be instant impact players. And Winnie Watkins has been one of those kids. Again, he's a kid that I've watched for a long time through his high school career. Of course, we culminated with his many trips to the All-American Bowl, Polynesian Bowl. But this was a kid, when you saw him, he was very undersized. He's not your typical wide receiver frame, but man, he is faster than the flash and more. And I knew that. And this is a kid that you constantly see him work, even when the camera's on, when it's off. This is a kid who just knows how to put in the work. And I think it's definitely paying off. And we've seen him be kind of one of the guys that we've heard about around practice. It's really as one of the young guys, early enrollees, that is really stepping up to the plate and just really been a kid in that wide receiver room that's, while he's been young and really the Rebels haven't had a chance to see how his, as we call that, transition translate onto the field. But we're hearing from spring ball that he's really been kind of a force in that wide receiver room as a new young guy, that don't be surprised next season if we see him get a lot more reps. But I think, again, being an early enrollee has its advantages. I know that he was on that last stint. I remember talking to his mom in San Antonio. They drove all the way from Florida when he was doing the All-American Bowl, and soon after he hit on a flight to the Polynesian Bowl, and then was back in South Florida to compete with the 7-on-7. So this is a kid who is a student of the game, who puts all into it. And I think now we're finally seeing that. I know there's that big question when you get elite high school players like Winnie Watkins, how they're going to translate. But it's been really good to hear that this spring, as soon as, he's kind of stepped foot, that he's really been turning some heads and impressing coaches in that chemistry that he has as an early enrollee for the Rebels. So definitely a young kid that's going to be exciting to watch, through the spring OTAs, as you want to call them, or whatever. But yeah, definitely exciting to watch. Winnie Watkins been turning heads, but it should be no surprise that he's going to bring a lot to the table. So again, it's great to see that Austin, it's kind of like a Zen, when Lane Kiffin got here, he inherited a definitely different ball club. But like I always say, the energy of your head coach and your staff, it really resonates. And I see, as much as people give Kiffin a lot of hell for doing the yoga, the Pilates, I feel like his Zen and his place from where he started to where he is now has really kind of translated onto this field with his players. It just seems like, at one time it was all about, Ruby knows about, we were always about Ole Miss winning parties. Everybody was talking about our elaborate, setup, and we are talking more about tailgating and the electricity in the Grove than what were we talking about the field. But I feel like in the Lane Kiffin area, we finally found our place and our footing to be taken as a serious SEC team. And we've been a lot better even before, times and spurts, but I think that zen and that balance have really shown and translated on the field. So again, a lot of exciting things coming into spring OTAs down in Oxford.
Yeah, and I want to talk about something that Blind Squirrel Sports just put on there because it made me laugh that he had said, I was surprised to see Ole Miss manhandle my dogs on the lines of scrimmage last year. I know that they were improved, but I didn't expect that. I think Leanne and I both share the same sentiment about this of, we kind of expected that from the defensive line, but it was an utter shock that the offensive line performed the way that they did in that game. Leading up to the game and, mostly every single game afterwards, the offensive line struggled a lot. Obviously improved from the year before, but the Georgia game was definitely an anomaly. And I think that we're continuing to see, on the recruiting trail and the transfer portal that Ole Miss is really, really trying to kind of beef up that front line and kind of replace the massive defensive line and production that they had last year.
No, and like you said, and we say it all the time, we've talked about it. You can have the most elite guys in your backfield, whether it's offense or defensive side of the ball, but it starts up front. And if you don't win those games in the trenches, if you don't, whether it's defense or offensive side of the ball, it's tough for you to get those whole 4 quarters of football. And for so long, we saw Ole Miss, be really strong at the front end of a game, but couldn't close, or vice versa. We would be lagging behind, and then all of a sudden, but I think we're slowly finding that way as we learn to find that zen and that balance in that roster. But again, it's been great to see that. I feel like Ole Miss and definitely Lane Kiffin and the staff have really been taking this more interesting approach to getting more guys on those front lines for us. Maybe not the most elite talked about offensive and defensive lines, but again, it's not so much about that. It's about guys that can fit a program, that can translate on the field. So it's going to be interesting to see, but again, doing a great job on the recruiting trail. We got a couple linemen, defensive linemen, going to be on OVs, and there's a lot of big time players, especially out of Texas. I think, again, I'm going to say the praises of Coach Nash being hired as our player personnel director. That's really going to continue to open up that pipeline in recruiting into Texas and even into Louisiana and other places. And I think that, that this may be the time where Lane Kiffin and his staff start building on that high school trail. Maybe not guys that are going to start, but it's a lot more difficult in those games that we saw that came so close, is to replace a good lineman as it is to bring in a new wide receiver or bring in a new corner. It's just hard to find a defensive lineman in critical games that you could just swap out for whatever reason. So it's good to see the approach, like you said, that they're taking, but they're taking, not that they didn't before, but I feel like we weren't recruiting linemen on either sides of the ball as hard as we've been this last season.
For sure.
And there's a couple guys, Leanne, that are standing out early. It's only week 1, but one guy along the defensive front who was at Ole Miss last year, and another guy who is an incoming transfer.
Well, 2 guys that really, really want to talk about that I think Cam Franklin is a kid that we highly recruited out of Lake Cormorant, 5-star. I mean, he was the top player in SIP, nationally, everything, saw some reps, but, plagued by injury and whatnot. But, with the transition on the defensive line, he's finally going to get his turn and opportunity. We're hearing a lot of good things in what he's doing. It was no surprise that when he had his opportunity and he was fully healthy, that he definitely was going to translate onto the field. And another kid that we got to see bits and pieces of that, again, that I've been excited to watch has been Will Eccles, another Houston, Mississippi native. I mean, the kid's story coming in, no one knew who he was when I first met him down in San Antonio at the combine coming in. He just blew everybody away. Everyone thought he was out of Houston, Texas, just because of the kind of talent that he brought. He was just very towering physical very early on, and you could kind of see that there was something special about him. But that's another kid that you've seen work in silence, wait his turn, kind of a rare breed these days, especially when kids are coming up. We see that they're searching for a place where they can play right then, right there. Not only are they looking for an NIL deal back, but they want to play right now. And it's been good to see Will Eccles. He's come in some critical parts of the game, but again, he's another kid from the state who's just really been kind of one of those stories you love to hear. He wasn't the most highly recruited kid coming out of Mississippi, but it took that one moment, him hitting a couple national camps and stages, and now, I mean, he's made all, as a true freshman, been on every pre-All-American, heading that direction. So, when I first saw this kid and just how he worked, I knew he was going to be something special. So again, I think while there's a lot of transition on the defensive line, it's good to see young guys like Cam Franklin, especially a kid like Will Eccles, really step up. And I mean, rarely do you get to see guys, two elite players from in-state that are having this opportunity to really make an impact. I mean, they're usually kind of spread out, but I mean, we're talking Lake Cormorant and Mississippi, and Houston, Mississippi, next man up to really anchor down that defensive line that, has become so critical for this Ole Miss defense, in big games, and will continue to be, a thing. But again, still a lot of work to be done. I know that there's a lot of question on where we're going to go with the secondary and how we're going to go there. That's a big thing that Lane's kind of talked about. But again, you can baby steps, small steps, but you can't do it all in one spring. But definitely, spring will, like I say, is really an evaluation period. But again, it's great to see, like Ruby said, in a time where you don't always get to see the young guys step up. We've been hearing a lot more about the young guys really stepping up and really finding their comfort zone. So it's an exciting time, and glad to see what we're going to see.
When I hear the name Houston, Mississippi, wow, that brings a story to mind. I got a speeding ticket one time in Houston, Mississippi, and that wasn't the end of it, because what ended up happening, I wasn't the safe driver that I am now. So please, no one out there judge me. But at that point, I had quite a few points on my driving record, and actually, I wasn't supposed to get my driver's license renewed. I had so many points on my license, but somebody magically made it go away. And when I went to go get my license renewed, the clerk, now you probably couldn't get away with this now. This was like in 2000. They just kind of like said, you know what, we'll just like ignore this. And there you go. So.
And another story about Houston, Mississippi. Houston has always produced a lot of talent, but a kid that we've talked a lot about who's going to be a part of our Ole Miss team, Bryson Walters. His dad, he was at Itawamba coaching there, but actually he's going to be the new head coach over at Houston High School football. So again, we might be seeing more Rebels from Houston, Mississippi heading over to Ole Miss. But again, it's really exciting relationships. It's really a small world. I always say that the Ole Miss beat, as big as it is in the SEC, it's really kind of like a small little family, small little world. So again, exciting to see. But again, spring practice, it looks a lot different than I think that we're used to. But like Ruby's putting out those blurbs, we don't get enough access, and then here's Lane giving us some more access. So again, we'll see what else we can manifest.
There we go again. We're gonna manifest stuff now. All right, I like it. The Houston Hilltoppers. I think I got that right. Is that right?
Yeah, no, it is. No, it is. And every time I hear Houston Hilltoppers or I hear Hilltoppers, I think of Western Kentucky because they are the Hilltoppers too.
Yeah.
Leave It to Being in Kentucky. So every time a Hilltopper, yeah. So I was like, that's how I remember. I was like Houston, but yes, no, that's correct. Houston Hilltoppers, and they are maroon and white. So for all those Rebels that go to Houston, Mississippi, unfortunately, they got to wear that maroon and white like they're in Starkville. But it's all right. We'll let it pass. Keep bringing that good talent to the SIP.
Well, if I could do a better job of rolling my R's, this would sound much better. But Rebel recruiting rumblings, Leanne, it's all yours.
It's all mine. So what we've talked a lot about, I mean, there's a lot more to go through. We got so much going on. again, the official visits, the unofficial visits are coming. We had the Rebels just hosted 4-star QB Gavin Sadwar. He was actually going to come and jump on with us and tell us one-on-one. He actually had an extended visit, was only supposed to be there for a day, but it turned into a 2-day visit. Unexpectedly was supposed to go visit another university, but due to storms and all that, he's like, let me just camp out in Oxford. So again, like Ruby always says, when we can get them to town, they never want to leave. But of course, like many of the players that we talk about, it's Friday. So what does it mean? They're heading to their respective 7-on-7 circuits. So he was actually on a plane to Dallas, but was kind enough to give me some quotes that I told him we could talk about on the air. So even though he's not here in person, he's on his way to Dallas to compete with level 82, his 7-on-7 team. Of course, we're going to be there next weekend talking to some of our Ole Miss players. Of course, we know Jamison Powell, Ole Miss commit, trying to get Ryder Lyons to the SIP and everything. He had a monster weekend playing with the Cold Hearts. It's always interesting, guys. We think that there's only rivalries within the college circuit, especially between, Ole Miss and in a place like Mississippi State, LSU. But man, one thing I've learned with 7-on-7, those kids have some rivalries and beef. I think that the Cold Hearts versus the City Reapers, who has a lot of our prospects. I mean, these kids, 7-on-7 is a whole new level as far as rivalries, but we were glad that Gavin could kind of enjoy his time, not for 1 to 2 days. Again, like I said, he wasn't planning on staying for more than one, but they were able to keep him a while. And again, Lane Kiffin really going hard with these 2026, 2027 classes, these young guys, especially at the quarterback position. We know that he's been pulling all the stops, trying to not only, Ruby talked about this is, our quarterback room. Of course, we know Austin Simmons is going to be that guy, but we got AJ Maddox. We have, Clarkson, all guys who have experience bringing to the table, adding depth. But of course, Lane Kiffin looking to build for the future, going after some of the nation's top, quarterbacks in the country. So let me pull up his quotes because I don't want to misquote him. But I mean, he had a lot to say just talking to him. Kind of what his experience was in Oxford. I mean, when we think, you get a lot done in one day, but he definitely got a lot in two. But again, these kids are on the move more than I think all three of us combined. I mean, I don't think I could go from finishing school to getting on a plane to go playing crazy OT at OT7, but these kids managed to do it. But, I told him what he really loved about, Oxford and the campus. And he said, it's one of the nicest campuses I've been to. Everyone is so nice. It was an adjustment coming from Philly. So he's an East Coast kid, having strangers randomly talk to me. So I felt when I was reading that, some of the most realist answers, because he's like he said, he's from Philly. He's, you don't just get random people. But I mean, that all the people, when they see a recruiter, a potential recruit, we're going to roll out the red carpet. He said that the facilities were great, but what stood out most to him was the resources they put into their QB room. So this is a kid who really not noticed the overall aspect, but again, he notices as a QB what kind of things that Lane Kiffin and his staff, along with the university, have poured into developing and having the resources for the QB position. So he said that he spent most time with Coach Judge, who was really great. And they just talked about ball and works hard, making sure that QBs are set up successful. He really liked that. Coach Weiss does an excellent job of running their QB meetings, and Coach Kiffin sits in them as well. And he just really went on about not only the atmosphere, which, Ruby's talked about it. It's one of the nicest campuses in place. But again, this is a kid from all the kids that I've talked to as far as positions when they talked about their visit. He just was really impressed about all the resources they devote just to not just developing QBs, but what QBs can get when they come to Ole Miss, no matter if they're starting or what kind of, whether they're coming in as a high profile candidate and not. And he says that not a lot of programs that he's had the opportunity to talk to or visit put in that much effort, to his Ole Miss. So that's really great to hear. So for all those QBs, looking for a place, like Sadwar says, he was talking about, Ole Miss is doing what they're talking about. Not only are they developing QBs, but they're providing them with the tools to be successful. I mean, we've talked about Dart, we've talked about Corral, guys who may necessarily weren't up there when they were recruited, but when they came to Ole Miss, we saw, how easily Dart went from being low in the draft, but look at what all he was able to do and accomplish and how quickly that turned around. So he was really complimentary of what Ole Miss, overall the campus is and how welcoming it was, especially to a kid from Philly, but more importantly, just how much they built into the QB room. He, like you said, he was planning to stay just one day, but he was there for two full days, and he felt like they just devoted a lot of time and attention to him. They let him explore Oxford, took him around campus tour. He said that Coach Judge really went out of his way and spent the most time with him. He was really good at answering all his questions, and he did a great job of explaining how Ole Miss works and how it'd be a good fit for me. I know as much as we talk about the talent that a 4-star QB can bring to the table, again, when it comes to QBs, it's not only about loving the campus, what they can do, the development, but is this can this kid fit in your system, and can this kid see themselves fitting in your system, vice versa? Because again, you see a lot of talent. We saw it all last season. How quarterbacks, as talented as they were, as highly ranked as they were, the teams that they were with, they just weren't a fit. They did, and then so you don't want to put yourself in that situation as far as going to scout QBs that as highly touted as they are, that they're not going to fit, in that Rebel offense that's become a signature of Lane Kiffin. So he was talking about how Coach Judge didn't have enough good things to say about it and had a lot of top places and held a lot of top positions. He has a son in the program, and his son loves it. So again, Coach Judge really recruiting detail here, not only bringing his experience to the table as far as a coach at Ole Miss, but also, sharing his own personal experience having a son in the program. Of course, when you're a 4-star QB, you know that Ole Miss is not the only one knocking. And while it has a lot to offer, guys, he said that some of the other schools that are really recruiting him harder in constant contact, aside from Ole Miss, are Syracuse, Missouri, and UCLA are really the ones that he hears from him the most. So despite him being a Philly QB, he's really been rising up the ranks. But he talks about, on his side and what he could bring to the table. He says that he's just really confident in his QB abilities to play QB. He just doesn't run around looking for a play to make. He understands offense and concepts and how to attack defenses. He's been coached really well at his position. My high school coach, he said, played at Villanova as a QB and understands offense as good as anyone. And we run many of the plays that Ole Miss does, and they just call different names. So as far as he just really presented the table, as much as Ole Miss was saying how he's a fit, he showed them right back like, hey, I may be from the East Coast. My coach played at Villanova, but listen, we run a lot of the same book of what you play. So as much as we were pitching at him, he was pitching to us. But again, he just said that he's looking for a place that the offensive staff support the QB position, which it seems like Ole Miss has really done a good job in his eyes so far in this first visit. Stability in their head coach. We talked about, Lane Kiffin finally finding that zen, from the time he started to it's now. And just a place where he can trust and be developed both ways on the field and maximize his potential as a player. But more importantly, he wants to find a place where he can develop and maximize his abilities as a person. So again, nothing but good things to hear out of the kid from Philly, hopping on a plane, going to go compete, so again, it was really good to see his openness, his realness, and it was good to see a perspective about a QB that's, not necessarily familiar with life in the South. Again, like he said, he's like, it's kind of different for a bunch of strangers to be talking, but he also saw that as a welcoming thing. He loves how much that, everybody pours into that Ole Miss football community. So a lot of good things we're hearing from his visit. He says he definitely will be back for another visit. But again, a 1-day turned into a 2-day. So all those prospects out there, like Ruby says, once we get you to Oxford, official or unofficial, a lot of things, a lot of resources being pulled into to build this program.
Everything I know about Philly, I learned from Silver Linings Playbook. But I'm going to think about him being shocked at how people are so nice and talking to him on the street for a while, because that's the perfect description of Ole Miss. And I can just see his face now when people are stopping him in the street. That's a good time.
Yeah, and there was in some of the national other interviews that he did as well, he was going to see another top program school. And again, it at first it looked like, oh, he did, Ole Miss was doing such a great job that he decided not to go, but it was the weather, but it really does seem like Ole Miss want, and I think that's always been our strongest suit. And I think too, having Coach Judge not only be a one-on-one take time with them, but I think, another thing that we see with Ole Miss and we've seen with a lot of the coaches that have young boys and young sons that are been in the program, or we see a part of the program. And I think taking off the coach's hat in Coach Judge's case and being able to talk to him as a father of a player within the program is also a different unique recruiting pitches that not all places have the luxury of having. Again, we have a lot of our coaches who have sons that are not necessarily being recruited just yet, but are already in that phase. We see, of course, Knox. We see, of Coach Kevin Smith's son, Kevin Bolden's son. Obviously, he's playing hoops, but again, these are kids that are kind of grown up around the program. So I think for us, that's also a great recruiting pitch when we can see some of our head coach and our assistant coaches, be able to share the recruiting experience, not just from a head coach's position trying to pitch a program, but also from just being a dad who's going through the same thing with their own son or their own daughter, in recruiting.
Well, the number one cornerback, that would be cornerback in the transfer portal, has already visited. Oh, no, that's coming up this weekend. Leanne and I caught up with Shad Williams earlier this week in the recruiting show, and he was just coming from, Ruby, close your ears, Arkansas. He just visited Arkansas, and he's going to visit Ole Miss this weekend after trips to Big Ten country, Purdue and Michigan State. He's also got a possible trip coming up to Wake Forest, but obviously once he sees that Ole Miss campus, it's just going to be all over.
We've been, like you said, we don't call them rumblings for nothing. You can take what you want. He's definitely been a kid who wasn't recruited. He was out of Russell, Alabama. We were kind of talking a little bit about the show. Most of these guys who weren't highly recruited took a different route, found himself at North Alabama, put up all sorts of numbers, kind of, showed out, really made a name for himself. And then the minute he hit the portal as a grad transfer, everybody was calling him. And I don't think it could be a better weekend for him to be in the SIP, especially with spring ball. Hint, hint. We need that secondary constantly rebuilt. He plays corner, he plays DB. And what we're hearing, not unofficially, is that we're in really good standing. The coaches have done a nice job, a really strong job of recruiting him even before he's seen the campus. I know a lot of people are like, well, he's been to Michigan State. He's come off Arkansas. He's still going to see, in my opinion is you got to let these kids have some kind of recruiting experience. If you don't let them see what other programs offer, there's a chance that you lose them down the road. You want to sink them in. But again, like we said, once we get into campus, we have a really good shot. The coaching staff, what we're hearing from a shot, everything, they just made it a point to recruit him strongly. He again, the OV wasn't set. And then before we went on air, he's like, I got an Ole Miss visit a set, OV set this weekend. So that was really great to hear, when they take that official visit, that's aside from the unofficials, but, in the transfer, edition of it, it's like speed dating. It goes super fast. We have kids that are saying, hey, we're going to go here, and they decide not canceling. So for him to lock in that official visit and let us know, it's a good thing, we know. But again, when we've talked to him, when I've talked with him, he's had nothing but strong things to say about the way Ole Miss is recruiting him. He really can see himself here. He talked about earlier when he first got that offer that they've just really made it clear that they have a vision for him in the defense, and he would come in and make an impact right away. I mean, those are the magic keywords. And I really think that we are in that good position to live up to that expectation. I know that all these colleges are making pitches. They know what a good player he's going to be. Again, he's the number one available corner in the transfer. But I mean, no better place than for him to show up this weekend during spring ball, Saturday, tomorrow, and say like, hey, like, we need to rebuild the secondary. You can fit in right here. I mean, everything that we've told you, everything, this vision that we have pitched to you since the moment you hit in this transfer portal, here, look, it's right here. Look, see yourself in these OTAs, see yourself here. And I really think that Ole Miss has done it. And I like where we are in this position now. Will he take his other visits? We haven't heard, but I feel like this may be the last visit. He may not make it to Wake Forest. He's coming off Purdue, but I really do like, too early to call. You never know in these situations, but I feel like from what I've heard from the staff, what I've been hearing from him, I really liked. I'm not going to do the whole crystal ball thing, but I will say just kind of what my gut feeling is and where I feel like we've set ourselves up. And I think really what we can show this weekend that we really, all those things that we've been pitching to him from the jump, they're going to come into fruition right here because we need to rebuild that secondary. And again, I think that he brings a lot to the table, what he's done at North Alabama, just when you hear his tape. And he would come in and he would be an instant impact player because, again, the secondary is something Lane Kiffin's really talked about. It's going to be something that they stress during the spring practice is really under evaluation. And right here, Ashad Williams showing up is kind of, that icing on the cake, that cherry on top. So I think we're in good position to really set a good, strong point. So we'll see. We'll see if he hits Wake Forest, but I like where we stand with Ashad Williams.
Yeah, I'm really excited about him. I think his versatility is just, something that Ole Miss desperately needs, especially in this offseason. And if all goes well, like Mark says, I'm manifesting it now. Hopefully he gets out to spring practice and, just commits right there and signs the papers and just hops into the practice. So that would be an ideal situation for Ole Miss. But I guess we'll see over the next couple days.
And I'm glad you hit on the versatility because, that's one thing when you see with his tape, he's just versatile. He plays so many. He's a kid that you want to get when you hit the transfer portal. He's one of those value players because he can play multiple roles on the defense. And so with our secondary constantly rebuilding, that wherever you're going to put a player like Ashad Williams, that he's going to be high level. He's got extremely high level football IQ. So again, when you're shopping around in a limited time, because we don't know, what kind of pickings we're going to have in April. We definitely can't rebuild our entire secondary in April on the portal. So again, having Ashad Williams as a grad transfer come in, like you said, Ruby, with that kind of versatility, playing multiple roles on the defense, definitely those eyes have got to be lighting up in Oxford this weekend. But again, I like where we stand with Ashad Williams. But like you said, we'll see. Got to wait till that check cashes and clears and all that good stuff, like you say.
Our interview with Ashad Williams, thanks to Leanne, we have placed that link right in the chat, so check it out. Again, we spoke with Ashad Williams, the #1 cornerback in the transfer portal this week on the recruiting channel. And check us out on Instagram. This was launched maybe a month ago, something in that range. And I got to say that our guys, Patrick and Gabe, have done a remarkable job delivering posts of breaking news, but more so the stuff that I love are just the ratings, the rankings, and they did a full scale look at a lot of the nicknames across college football, like Tennessee Volunteers. Why are they called the Volunteers? And a little historical look at how a lot of those things came to be. So it's a fun look at college football. You get the serious stuff, you get the fun stuff. And again, that's right on Instagram. And Ruby, I'm sure that you have it's been weighing on your mind the entire hour. You just have hardly been able to compose yourself as to why there are no helmets on the shelves.
Yeah, I've been very curious.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been captivated by that. So I'm going to let you guess what I was demonstrating here. Let's do this. Here we go. And so as motorists, as drivers, these represent Georgia. Okay, went on a little bit longer. We're getting to it. So basically, I'm mimicking the Georgia football team as motorists. Basically, that's what they're doing across the state of Georgia.
I actually have been waiting to talk about this and for a segue into it. So I'm glad that you brought this up.
Well, my thoughts are out there many times. So you've got the floor, Ruby.
My only thought about this is, for Kirby to come out and obviously they can't stop doing this and whatever, like it's not even news at this point, 2 in 1 day, just another day in Athens. But for Kirby to come out and, have that full press conference about, players aren't really coachable these days. They get their feelings hurt. They're really sensitive. They're not coachable. that was the main thing that I saw yesterday after driving a car into an apartment and then reckless driving again. I just want to see a tally at this point. You know, we just talked about the Instagram at the Voice of College Football. It'd probably be in bad taste a little bit to do it, but I just want to know, you know, how many at this, you know, what's the line? Where are we going to stop it? Or what are we doing?
Last number I heard was 24 incidents. So this might be 25 or 26 in 2 years.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Absolutely crazy.
So my thoughts are basically that we can only be expert at so many things. Usually nobody becomes an expert at much, if anything. So Kirby Smart is hired to be a football coach, and he's an expert at that. And so he knows football. He knows how to lead men. That's what he's called to do as well, young men, and then also lead his coaching staff. But obviously, this is out of his realm of expertise. And I'm not saying that this is an easy situation to deal with in any such way. I'm not saying you should just be able to take care of it. Just harsher talks and more discipline's going to do it. That obviously isn't going to do it. I know that last summer that he instituted fines apparently on NIL benefits, but that hasn't taken care of the issue. All I'm saying is that Kirby Smart, like any CEO, which is what a college football coach is, basically, he's making $13 million a year. He's a CEO at this point. The football coach portion of his job is minimized. It's more about being a CEO, and a good CEO understands that he's not an expert at everything. You need to surround yourself with great people. You need to go get the resources and talk with the people and bring in the people that are expert at this sort of thing, dealing with these kind of situations. Bring them into it and have them give you excellent advice. I know that it's out there. And the next thing is, I just think maybe this would be my dividing line if I had any authority in the situation. And the next person that should be held accountable are not necessarily just the players, of course, but Kirby Smart, because while I'm not blaming him, it's not his fault. It's his responsibility. So who should be fined, who should be suspended going forward would be Kirby Smart.
Yeah, it just seems like that it's almost like a joke at this point. And it's, you know, it's common thing with Georgia people. You know, we talk about, oh yeah, Georgia can't get behind the wheel, but it's not funny. And you wonder what levels, you know, or how long the Athens PD is going to allow this, or, you know, what they're doing in that front as well. And, you know, I've been to Athens, the beautiful city. It's a walkable city. And the excuse for it, or, you know, you think about like the levels of, you know, how much is alcohol in play with this, because while, yes, I think his name was Nitro, was reckless driving and arrested for that. I don't think that, you know, alcohol was involved in his situation, but I don't know very many people or incidents who have driven a car into an apartment complex and, you know, some substance wasn't a part of that. And there just needs to be a bigger conversation. And, you know, I can't speak to what Georgia's doing. I didn't know about the NIL thing, but it's just, this has to be embarrassing for the program. It's embarrassing for the town. Like you said, it's embarrassing for Kirby, and for, you know, it's not 100% his fault or his responsibility. When you're making $13 million a year and you've committed to these parents and, you know, different people that you'll help raise their children and protect them, at some point you do have to take full responsibility for, you know, there has to be done to fix this. Something has to be done, because, you know, oh, they're off the team. You're at this rate, they're going to have no team. So.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. It's a sad situation across the board. But, you know, as much as you want to say that Kirby's a football coach, like Mark said, and you guys said, there's about accountability when you're getting paid that much, when you really are around these kids more than they're around their own family. You have to take some kind of responsibility. And I mean, while George is up there with the count, we see it so many times. You know, Ole Miss has had to deal with it with several transfer recruits. I mean, we've talked about some kids that, you know, it's hard to see them because you know that they're such amazing talent, but whatever struggles they're going with on in their personal life is you know, plaguing them. And that's a big thing. You know, I was glad when Lane Kiffin, when he came on staff and started, and a lot of other coaches have done it too, you know, and not just football, but in other programs and men's swim, is having the conversation about mental health resources, getting those things, because as much as, you know, we love the glory and the thing that, you know, SEC football brings, there is an extreme, a lot of pressure on some of these kids. And, you know, sometimes we forget that they're young kids. If we as people have been, you know, at our own time, been through the college process, and we've all been through it, where we've been tired, we're exhausted, we're like, what are we doing here? You know, or we go have fun. You know, we've all done it at a different level at different times. And I mean, I can only imagine for some of these kids now, it's not excusable for their actions. Of course, they have to have accountability. But much like you said, Ruby, there's got to be a conversation, because again, we got the resources. So much as we pour resources into the athletic facilities and having all these things, there's got to be resources for these kids, because clearly this is not just something you do on a whim. You know, this is not just something that is not driven, like you said, by something, whether it's substance or whether that thing, and where's that all steering from? Because, you know, as much as these kids put out on a football field or where their athletic ability, it also does hurt the face of the university. And I talk about it from a recruiting standpoint, because as much as you want your kid to go play, we've all traveled to Athens. It's a beautiful city, safe community. You know, it's walkable. It feels like a college town. It's got a different allure, much like Oxford. But again, when you're a parent and you want to send your kid to a top SEC program, or, you know, for all those in-state kids that have dreamed about playing in Athens, have dreamed about playing in Georgia, you can't help but be a parent and a family member looking like, as much as you want to send your kid there because of the athletic programs and all the things, you also worry about, this is becoming a norm. And it's not just becoming a norm within the university, it's becoming a norm within the community. Because like you said, when it comes, you know, not criticizing what they're doing, but again, in any other situation that a normal person who doesn't have those credentials of being an athletic superstar or whatever, that wouldn't fly. If you or I, or Mark and I drove a car into an apartment, it wouldn't be under the radar. It would be like, okay, we're going to jail, you know, we're going to be in big trouble, you know, and all these kind of things. And again, just suspending a kid from the team doesn't fix the problem. It's a Band-Aid, you know, because it keeps happening. This is not something that just happened, you know, all of a sudden it's been happening consistently over a consistent period of time. So definitely something, a lot of conversations definitely have to be held, not just in Athens, but, you know, in other programs, because there's just such high pressure and so many things going on that, you know, we don't always like to talk about with these athletes, but they're humans too. And it's a real conversation, you know, that more, you know, programs have to look at, because there's just so much more into play with these kids than there was, you know, 5-10 years ago.
I also think it's important to mention too that these are the ones that are getting caught. You know, this isn't just a one-off situation, or every single time that, you know, a player or even just a Georgia student in general are doing these things, like, oh, they're getting caught every single time. I can't imagine what, you know, a lot of these players are being able to get away with. And it's not to say that it's not happening in Oxford. You know, we've seen a lot of situations happen there where, you know, a little something comes out and only a few people know about it, and it kind of just gets swept under the rug. It's also a bigger conversation that needs to happen. But I think that we, you know, it's easy to talk about Georgia because it happens so consistently and it seems like nothing's being done about it. But yeah, I mean, the other thing too is stop letting 18-year-olds have these super fast cars. And that's something that a hill that I'll die on for sure. But, you know, NIL makes it difficult when they can buy it on their own.
Yep, sure.
Good stuff out of you too. As always, this is what you get each and every Wednesday, folks, 2 p.m. Eastern time over on the Ole Miss channel. And if you can only listen, you have no excuse. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and the rest of the platforms there for Ole Miss Rebels Live. And of course, again, Leanne and I get together on Tuesdays for recruiting. If you love recruiting, that is the place to be. The portal's coming up as well. That's Tuesdays at 1 Eastern on the recruiting channel. Leanne, Ruby, any parting shots besides go get them Rebs today and win 2?
Yeah, that's the main one for me. Is it's going to be a good week, and hopefully when we talk on Tuesday that they are in the second round and winning those games too. Probably, they'll play on. That's all I got.
So, just hotty toddy and good luck to the Rebs out in Waco and Miami. I mean, not Miami. I wish we were in Miami, Milwaukee. Bring it on home. And like Ruby said, hopefully we're talking about more hoops on our football channel. Ole Miss Live. Join us next week on Tuesday. Hotty toddy.
Howdy toddy.